Are you prepared to deal with a chicken health emergency? Well, today I'm going to show you the things that I like to keep on hand to make sure I am ready to step in at a moment's notice if one of my chickens starts to have a health problem. Let's have a look at the individual supplies that I like to have on hand. I try to have them sort of in one spot, but that doesn't always happen. But luckily, a lot of these are just sort of household stuff you might have lying around. The first thing you want to have is an old towel. That helps if you need to catch a chicken. It helps to keep the chicken calm if you need to cover their head up while you're treating them. And if you need to give them a bath or something like that, you've got your towel ready to dry them off. And then that's the other thing. This tub here, you always want to have some kind of tub. It could be a large bowl. It could be a bigger tub than this, because a lot of the things you need to deal with chickens and health emergencies is they're going to need to have a bit of a bath. So having a tub is pretty essential, and you don't want to be wandering around looking for it, so make sure you know where your chicken-sized tub happens to be. Then you've got your basic stuff. You want to have rags or cloths for cleaning anything up. You want to have some gloves for keeping everyone safe, because chicken health emergencies can be, there could be blood, there could be poop, there could be unpleasant things, so you want to have some gloves. I always like to keep some iodine on hand for general antiseptic purposes. I keep a little bottle of oil, a little dripper bottle of oil, because that's nice and tidy and easy to manage when you're trying to wrangle a chicken in one hand and you've got gloves and everything else. So you can just take the dripper bottle out. You could even have it ready to go out of the bottle before you go. Pop it on your gloves if you need to use oil for any reason. And that would be sort of for reproductive issues, if your hen's got an egg stuck in them or something like that. But we're going to get into the specifics a little bit later. I always have some Epsom salts, and that is also what you use in the tub with the water. So again, that's usually when you're trying to deal with an egg-bound situation. It helps to relax the muscles if that is a problem. I like to keep the self-adhesive bandage. So this is actually one for horses, and this is the kind that I keep for all bandaging purposes, for people, for chickens, for smaller pets, because they're a really good size and they're cheaper than getting them for other things or for people. And the thing with these is you can cut it or even tear it to any size that you need. So this is mostly only going to be useful for chickens if you are needing to bandage a foot or a leg, because trying to bandage other parts of chickens is quite complicated and usually doesn't work out very well. I mean, it can be done, but feet and legs is your main reason to use a bandage. Always have some scissors on hand. Ones with a rounded off edge are better if you need to clean up like feathers around chicken butts or anything like that, but that'll cut your bandage or anything that you need. Then I always have an empty, clean, safe syringe. And what I use these for, you can also use a dropper like in the oil bottle, is if I need to give electrolytes or water to a chicken, this allows me to control the drops down onto their beak, because that's how you kind of get water into them. If they're not able to do the full motion of drinking themselves, you just do little drops down on their beak and they will hopefully lick that up, or whatever chickens do. They don't really lick things. And then the last thing I have, thank you, Astarion. The last thing I have is some ivermectin, which is pretty much, if I have a chicken that's not doing well, that is not able to move very well, I always pop some ivermectin. He wants to join the party. Always put some ivermectin on them, because that's going to deal with any external parasites they might have, which they might not be able to deal with while they're not feeling well. You could also have mite powder to serve the same purpose. Yeah, okay, dude. So that is what's in my first aid kit. I also like to keep a net, my chicken catching net on hand. So that just lives in the shed. I know where it is. I can grab it if I need to. Because they really want to join the party today. Thank you, roosters. If you have chickens that are not very tame, or even if they are tame but they're a bit sick and they're not feeling like they want to be handled, they might try and get away from you. My chickens are chill, but they're not that tame. So I do need to use my net usually to catch them. And nets are the best way to catch chickens because they can't seem to ever figure out exactly how a net works. So you can come on down and catch them quite easily with it. It's a really good idea to have some kind of cage that you can pop a chicken that's not feeling very well into. Now, this is sort of a tricky one to decide when you should use the cage because chickens are flock animals. It does stress them out to be isolated from their family, so to speak. So you need to weigh up the stress versus the protection and keeping your chicken accessible when you go to using the cage. So I have this one here. It's sort of an old one. I've had it for years. I think it's originally for other animals, maybe guinea pigs or something, to take them transportation, but it's good. The lid opens all the way, so it's an easy access in and out. I usually just pop down a towel or something in there to keep the chicken comfortable. And what I tend to do where possible is if I have to put a sick chicken in the cage, is I then put the cage somewhere where the flock is going to be so that the chicken is not feeling like they're being isolated. So we're reducing that stress. So it'll go in the coop at nighttime. I'll pop it somewhere in the shade during the daytime so they can still see their flock mates. And I think that's quite important. If you don't need to pop your chicken into such a small cage, but you just need to kind of contain them away on their own, the sorts of cages I use for my broody hens are really good, and that's what I use if I'm sort of in a midpoint between needing to go in here or just needing to have some space on their own. So it is important to think about how are you going to isolate and also access a chicken if you need to give them some medical treatment. Common health situations that you might run into? Well, with chickens, you're sort of got three main things. It's cuts and scrapes, things that are sort of a wound and are going to involve caring for the wound. That's sort of your first one. Surprisingly, chickens don't hurt themselves that often, and when they do, they heal really, really fast. So that is excellent. But if you've got a chicken that has damaged themselves in some way, then you can step in. The second thing you're going to run into, hopefully you don't, but it is quite common, is issues with egg laying. So reproductive issues in your hens. And that is an unfortunate situation. If something like that happens, so here we're talking about egg binding, and that's where an egg gets sort of stuck inside the hen and they can't get it out. And that, well, when an egg is blocking the whole thing, then they also cannot poop and things just go bad pretty quickly. That's one of the things that is probably you're most likely to be able to get on top of. Other things that happen there are when eggs can break inside your hen, and that is really problematic. It causes infection quite often, and then you can step in with some bathing and support. But when reproductive things start going wrong with your hens, the chances of them pulling through go down, unfortunately. So do not beat yourself up if you have provided treatment and unfortunately that hen isn't able to pull through and she passes away. It does happen. They've been bred to lay eggs at a much higher frequency than they ever would in a natural state. Well, I mean, chickens aren't natural in the first place. They're a manufactured breed for humans. They're domesticated. But even, a few hundred years ago, they lay a lot less eggs than even our sort of heritage breeds do today. So from that perspective, things do go wrong in chicken reproductive systems just because they're laying a lot of eggs. They're laying an egg every day in some cases, and it can just go wrong. So that is a common one. I've had to deal with that in quite a few instances in my flock. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but you do have to try your best to give your chicken a fighting chance. And the final thing that will happen on a hopefully not too often basis in your backyard flock is just general illness. Now that can be really difficult to diagnose, so you just sort of go with the basic first aid type things to help your chicken. So that's like fluids, making sure they have access to food and water if they can, that they are warm, that they are dry. That's where they might need to come into the cage or a separated area so you can better keep an eye on them. There is a really great resource called the Chicken Health Handbook, and that is a great one. I would recommend every backyard chicken keeper has a copy of that book, either digital or physical, because that will help you to sort of narrow down what might be happening for your chicken. I've had chickens pull through illnesses, and I've had chickens not pull through illnesses. They have a higher chance of pulling through if they're just sick than if something has gone wrong in their reproductive system. But again, by the time you notice that a chicken is not feeling well, things can have gone too far, because chickens will hide they will hide that they are feeling pain, they will hide that they are sick for as long as they possibly can. And when it gets to a point that you are noticing, it can be quite a ways down the track for trying to help them. So don't beat yourself up. Chickens are not helping you very much in trying to help them, and that's just part of their history as being the sort of animal that everything else wants to eat. So how do you treat these three main things that might go wrong in your chicken flock? Well, for things like cuts, scrapes, and open wounds, you're going to put on your gloves. You're going to use some iodine that you apply with a rag. You might need to clean it up first gently with some water. Now, I didn't mention before, but you do need to use saline solution, but I just make my own. So just with water and salt, I make it up fresh when I need to use it. So just make sure you have some sort of like non-iodized salt in the house and you're good to go on that front. Also, having a mild soap is good to have, but I always have some of that in the house as well, so I don't sort of keep it in the first aid kit. So just clean up the wound, iodine on the wound, and then honestly, provided it's not really, really serious, if your chicken is still like running around and pretty happy, that's basically all you need to do. Just keep an eye on it, retreat with iodine if you think you need to, but just basic first aid is really all you need to do in that situation. If you think that your chicken needs a bit of time on their own, pop them in a space that they have to their own to recover. But generally speaking, I find that just some basic treatment and they can just go right back to the flock and they're fine. Do be careful that the wound is not attracting other chickens to sort of peck at it in curiosity. Now, I haven't had that happen here, but in smaller spaces, if you're in a more enclosed run with higher numbers of chickens, you might need to keep that chicken separated until that wound is no longer sort of attractive to the other chickens to look at. Chickens heal really fast, like astonishingly fast. So that is a great one. Just do the infection management and they're probably going to be just fine. So if you've got a hen who is having difficulty with laying eggs, you think she might be egg bound, you think an egg might have broken inside her, or she's might be prolapsing, all sorts of quite nasty things can happen in a hen's reproductive system. You're going to get her, use the towel to keep her calm. You're going to fill your tub up with warm water with the Epsom salts. So the Epsom salts is to help muscles relax in case of the egg binding. And again, you're going to have your gloves on. You're going to do as much of a sort of a visual examination as you can, and then you're going to gently see what's going on inside the chicken with the oil on your gloved hands to see if you can see what's going on. If you can feel an unbroken egg in there, that's probably your best case scenario. You can gently massage in the warm water with the Epsom salt. So your chicken's hanging out in here. I find sometimes I've got my chicken in there and I pop the towel over the chicken's head, keeps them calm while I'm mucking about looking at their behinds. Then you're going to massage underneath the hen to hopefully loosen that egg and bring it down. If that's not happening, you've done a treatment, you're a few hours later or the next day and nothing has happened, that egg hasn't passed, you might need to go in again and try and get the egg out. But you want to avoid having to do that if possible, because you do run the risk of breaking that egg inside the hen, and that is not a great situation. And that's the next one we're going to talk about. If an egg has broken inside your hen, you want to do the same thing, get her cleaned up, Epsom salts. You may want to apply some iodine if there's any sort of cuts from the egg, but you're mostly trying to clean it up because you're trying to avoid infection setting in. Fingers crossed, you'll be able to avoid the infection and she will recover and be okay. But usually when that sort of thing starts happening, it's going to happen again. And at that point, you need to ask yourself if that hen can stay in your flock. If it's going to happen a lot, it does become a welfare issue and she might need to be culled for her own good, because it is not nice. They do suffer when these things happen for them. And if things have gone wrong to the point where they're not coming right again, she's always having problems with her egg laying, I would recommend for her own welfare that you do cull her for her own good. And that is always difficult to do. I do understand. We always want to give our animals like life and a chance at life. But if it becomes a recurring issue, you do have to think, is it fair for that to keep happening? And then the last thing being illnesses in chickens. And these can kind of cross. If they've got an egg broken inside them, they might be feeling quite ill and not be doing great. So the same things might happen. But if you've got a chicken, they're sick. How do you know if your chicken is sick? Well, they get a bit listless. Their wings get a bit droopy. They get hunchy. We call it the penguin stance. They might sort of lift up and look very, very uncomfortable. They won't be eating and drinking frequently. They'll be spending a lot of time just sitting, doing nothing and looking not too happy. So you've got a chicken, it looks sick. Well, you want to catch your chicken with your net if you need to. You want to see if you can get them to eat and drink on their own when they're just sort of like calm somewhere nice and quiet. If they're not eating and drinking on their own, that's where you can grab your syringe or your eyedropper, fill it with water in the first instance, and see by doing little drops on their beak if they will drink the water. You can make up a sugar water solution to try and sort of perk them up a little bit, and leave them with some like cat food or some kind of soft high protein food. You can try hand feeding them the food to see if they will eat it. And that's really what you can do for a sick chicken, is make sure that they are warm, they are comfortable, that they are getting fluids and hopefully eating if they will, but fluids is your main thing. And then you just sort of have to wait to see if they pull through. And fingers crossed they will pull through and they'll be back to the flock and it's like it never happened. And if they don't pull through, then you do need to think to yourself, do you have a method for ending that chicken's life if it is becoming a welfare issue? So when you have a flock of chickens or any livestock, you do need to think about what you are going to do if they get hurt, injured, sick in a manner that they are not going to recover from, and it becomes a welfare issue. And it's a really hard call to make, because how do you know if the chicken is going to pull through or not? And that's just based on experience. It's based on, I don't know, the feeling of the situation to make that call. But it is important that for their own good, you are able to step in and end it if that is the direction it's going in. And that is really hard. I have had chickens in the past that I haven't stepped in soon enough, and they have suffered past the point that I probably should have let them suffer. And it's a hard lesson to learn. And again, that just comes into experience. the more sick chickens you've had to deal with, and the more you get to see what the outcome has been of that, the more confident you will be at what point you need to step in and say, this is not going to improve, and for the welfare of this chicken, we need to end this now. But that is really hard. I am not gonna lie, I still struggle with it now. Luckily, my chickens don't get sick very often, and luckily they don't have that many reproductive issues, but reproductive issues can happen to anyone. It is just the nature of chickens and how we have bred them, and they have happened to me. And I've had both successes and failures at treating that, because at the end of the day, you can only do what you can do. They are chickens. They can die quite easily. It is not a failing on your part if it happens, but as a keeper of animals, you do have a responsibility to make sure you're providing the care that you can for the animals that you have to keep them as healthy and happy as they can be. Hopefully this has helped you to feel more prepared if something crops up in your backyard flock that you need to deal with. Chickens are pretty resilient animals. They pull through most things, but you do need to be ready and have the knowledge and the equipment to step in when things have gone wrong.